Well, it's so good to see you guys. We'll get jumping in just because I want to be respectful of time. And again, I'll say this one more time. I'm going to call out JT. Welcome back. Hello. Good to see your face. Olivia and Gail, we would love to see your faces. Alliance Bible. I don't know if you can put your camera on, but we would love to see you guys. The real heartbeat of this is super simple. So, Salt Community. If you guys missed yesterday, we actually announced this huge new launch to our Salt Community platform. And so, if you want to get more details, you can just go to saltcommunity.com, or you can head over to YouTube and see our launch event that we did, that we streamed live. You'll want to see it. You'll want to get behind the scenes. But today is the first meetup of 2026. And I'm super excited for what is in store for you today. As we were kind of dreaming and thinking about topic, we're like, oh, it's a new year. There's probably, a new energy to sort of add to your team. In fact, our team was joking that, does any church really hire somebody in December? I mean, with just all the chaos going on, is that really the next thing you need to add to your plate? Is like, I got to find somebody to add to my team. So we know that, like, if you have an open position December, it's probably staying open, and then you're going to kind of hit the ground running in January. So we thought this would be a good topic. But the concept's simple. We just want to connect. We want to connect with one another. And we had this dream of, like, what if we got an expert to just kind of unpack a couple of thoughts, and then let's have an open discussion. So while Andrew is speaking today, if you've got a question, put it in the chat. We'd love to have you talk about that later. I'll call on you and kind of help, moderate this a little bit, and keep your mic muted, but camera on, and we'll have a great combo, and then we'll just see where this thing goes. We have no agenda or expectation, but we want you to be a part. So welcome to the Salt Community, and welcome to the first meetup. So I'm going to introduce our guest, who is a dear friend. And I just want y'all to know I've broken bread with this guy. I've had coffees with him. He's the real deal. I jokingly said this earlier, but I was like, he's not some influencer that has like 4 ideas and he just knows how to like spin them 4 different ways. He has written so much knowledge and spewed it out into leadership coaching and all this, but he's the guy I text when I have, in fact, I've texted him about, hey, I need help with hiring, or I need help with, employee reviews, or I need help with this leadership challenge or this organizational problem I'm facing. And so he's my guy. And so the exciting part is he gets to now be your guy for the next couple of minutes. And so I would just encourage everybody in the room, tap into his wisdom. I mean, he has literally coached some of the best, Walgreens, Bridgestone. I don't want to say too many more because I may either break an NDA or make up some organizations, but, anyway, so without that, let me hand this over to my good friend. Some of them call him Dr. J, Andrew, Dr. Johnston. So, Andrew, take it away.
Man, thanks, Luke. I'm so proud to be your guy. Like when people go, "Oh, I got a guy for that." I'm so glad to be Luke's guy. Um, and I'm not sure if I'm specifically the hiring guy, which is what we're going to talk a little bit about today. But I work with a lot of different organizations and leaders across military, government, corporate, nonprofit, and a lot of ministry contexts. And hiring is a big topic everywhere. There are some peculiar wrinkles when it comes to hiring in ministry that can make it pretty tricky. And what I've found in moving in that space is there's not a lot of info about it, not a lot of people talking about it. And so today I've got just a few minutes to share some, I guess, top shelf pro moves. These are some commitments or some practical tips. I'm going to give you some very specific practical tips. I want to share some of these with you that you can put to work tomorrow. Like if you have a position open, or if you're trying to lead somebody who's leading a search or something like that. And I think you'll find them super pertinent to your real experience, and I hope they generate some questions following, like Luke said. So let me start out just by saying I think hiring is super important. It's not something that you treat as an add-on or sort of icing on the cake on your job. If you're a leader with the authority to hire, it's one of the most important things that you do. That's worth remembering because usually when it comes up, you've got a full to-do list and you don't have enough energy to spread across that. So you end up kind of doing hiring on the side. And I just want to encourage you to move it to the center of your to-do list and do a good job at it, because it's really a matter of stewardship. Your people are the most important thing that you're managing, the most important resources that you're using for God's purposes. and you want to have great people. They're gonna give you the capacity that you need to handle all the things that are on your plate. They're going to be the ingredients that create the culture that you long for to accomplish your mission and advance the kingdom. And so, you really want to put your best effort. If you've only got 1 minute and $1 to spend, if hiring is on your to-do list, spend it on that. Um, and I want to say right up front that I've got a bias that you're going to hear kind of behind all of this because I realize that hiring is so important. Um, I find myself saying this to myself regularly, and I offer it to you as sort of an adage, and that is this, that I prefer the pain of an open position to the pain of a bad hire. I'll say that again. I prefer the pain of an open position to the pain of a bad hire because, sometimes when you're looking for a person for a position, you're having trouble finding the right person or you're trying to move quickly and all. You feel the pain of being a man down or a woman down, right? There's more work. Somebody's having to pick up the pieces, and I don't want to convince you that there's not pain, and I don't want to convince the people on my staff that there's not pain. But I don't want to let that pain become so important that we move too quickly to fill it, because I've learned over time that making a bad hire creates pain too. And it's worse. It's so much harder once you've hired somebody and you've discovered they're a bad fit or they're not what you need. It's so much harder to address that. Now, I confess, the reason I say this to myself over and over is because unfortunately I've had to learn this lesson repeatedly. Every time I think I've learned it, I lose my nerve or the difficulties of having this open position get big enough that I go on and I settle for second best in my search, or I kind of cut corners or think that I can get away with something that I'm not thinking is the best hire. And sure enough, in due time, I find that I made the wrong choice. So I just want to encourage you up front to like square your shoulders to the difficulties you have when you have open positions, and remember that it's much better to have the pain of that open position, the pain of a bad hire, and put your energy into making sure you make good decisions. Now I want to give you some specifics on how to make a good decision. And I've divided this into two parts. The first part is before the process, because what I find is that most searches are doomed before they start. Like from the very beginning, they're going to produce bad results, and that's because people don't do prep work, or at least not sufficient or the right prep work. And this isn't like rocket science. It's just taking the opportunity to sit down and make a shopping list before you go shopping. Like sit down with your organization, with the people that are going to work with this person, the people that are involved in the processes they'll oversee or the ministry components that they'll be involved with, and come up with what you really want. Um, I mean, I don't know if you're like me. Occasionally I get in trouble because I'll go to the grocery store on my way home from work just because it's convenient. But it's really sort of, ad hoc. I just walk into the grocery store and think, oh, I got to get some stuff. And, honestly, I get some of the stuff I need, but inevitably I forget some things that I need too. Like I don't pick them up. And I always end up picking up stuff I don't need, all because I just didn't have a shopping list up front. That's one thing with my shopping. I can go again the next day, but you don't want to be that way in a search. So the first thing I'd suggest that you do is make that shopping list. Decide explicitly what you want in this position before you go looking for it. And I mean you're going to write it down. You're going to make a list of these things. And here's my practical suggestion for that. At the very least, you should think about these three things. What do we need this person to be able to do? I mean, that's just skills, right? Like specifics, what's involved in this job. And I mean, don't worry about getting too specific. You really want to think through this. What do I need them to be able to do? Secondly, what do I need the person in this position to know? And that's more about understandings, awareness, knowledge that they have, and make a list of that. And then finally is what personality traits do I need in this person? So that's not too hard, right? Just those three things. What do I want them to do? What do I want them to know? And what kind of personality traits do they need? And I'll focus on that third one. When I was in student affairs, we had to hire people in that profession. When I mean personality traits, I mean actually think about what kind of vibe you want this person to have, because sometimes it's important. And in my case, we wanted to hire only happy people. I mean, that sounds kind of weird to make that a requirement, but it was sort of code for us. What it represented was we understood that when you're in student affairs, and I think this is like any other ministry, it's a giving profession, right? And so we needed people that had already mastered the ability to maintain their own sort of emotional stability, because if they were not able to do that, inevitably they were going to turn around and look for finding that in somebody else or flip the script. And instead of being able to give to people, they were going to take from people. And so we put that on the list. I mean, we went shopping for people that had mastered that in some fashion. They didn't have to skip to work every day, but they needed to be solid emotionally. Does it make sense? I just want to encourage you that things like that are okay to put on your list when they have direct connections to how this job is being done or how somebody will fit into the culture or what kind of disposition is necessary in the midst of their job. All right, so that's the first thing, is to make that shopping list. The second thing to do beforehand is then to rank that shopping list. People always balk at this because it just sounds so tedious to look at that and decide, okay, which of these things that we've listed is more important than the others? And my practical suggestion here is you don't necessarily have to put it in, numerical order, but you need three categories. The things that are necessary, the must-haves, right? The things that are on your wish list, like we don't have to have it, but it really be nice. And then the third one is a category you might not have thought of, but I call it deal breakers. Deal breakers. And the reason I throw that in there is because when you get into a search, and some of you have experienced this, you might have done the work to know what you're looking for, but all of a sudden you start weighing each of those things against another one. Like this person is really not very good with details, even though we want that, but boy, they're really great at communicating. And we sort of look at that and go, well, they've got more communication and less detail, so it evens out. They're a good candidate. And I would say that's not a bad thing to think in certain ways, that people may be able to like borrow some of their ability in one thing to make up for their deficits in another one. That's okay. But when I was hiring people, I realized there were a few things that no matter how many other skills you had, it wasn't okay for you to have a deficit in these. That's what I call a deficit. You couldn't outbalance it. You know, Back in the same role where I talked to you about hiring happy people, we had three deal breakers. One of them was happy people. The other one was they had to be called to this profession, not just like needing a job. And the third one was we were trying to hire Christians, so we didn't want to just say, "Are you a Christian?" We needed their faith to be integrated into their everyday work and life in a real way. Those three things were deal breakers. And no matter how many specific skills you had that applied to this job, and no matter how great you were in them, you couldn't stack up enough of those if one of those three deal breakers was missing. Does that make sense? Well, hold on to that. And again, it's not just before the search to figure out exactly what you want, but it's to figure out like the relative importance of those things by ranking them. And again, I'd suggest that you have the necessary, the wish list, and if you need it, some deal breakers. All right, I'm moving along pretty quickly here. We can revisit any of these that are pertinent to you. But once you've done this, and now we're into the process. So those were the things to do before the process. This is the stuff to do during the process. And this may sound simple, but I just feel like I need to say it, especially if you're working in a system where a bunch of people are going to be involved in this. And that is, don't let the process diverge from the plan. Don't let the process diverge from the plan. Like you did the good work to think of exactly what you want, and you did the work to rank that. And so now when you start executing this or involving other people in it, you need to create a way to make sure that this happens reliably, that you look at the right things, that all the people are considering all the same things, etc. My practical suggestions about this are, look, when you get into the search and you have some happy surprises, where you figure out, oh, we really need something else. Or in some conversation, in some moment, somebody discovers a quality in this person that you realize is really important. That's fine, but go back and add that to the shopping list so that you know that every candidate that comes through your pipeline gets vetted on exactly the same things. And even more importantly, that every person involved in vetting them is also vetting them on the same things. Again, it goes back to that list that you made at the beginning there. I always encourage people even to use a matrix that they hand people to, figure out, give me your rankings of this person, or if I'm going to collect the opinions of a bunch of different staff members about this person, I'm going to drive that with a matrix that has my list on it, because then I know that everybody responded to the same things on the same people. All right, so not only making sure that the process doesn't depart from the plan, um, but get real in your questions. Nothing is as crazy and unproductive to me as people that will. I mean, I've literally seen this in interviews where they'll say, like, if you were a Bible character, which one would you be? Or I've even heard the classic, if you were a tree, which one would you be? And it's not that, honestly, I'm all about creative things, creative questions and stuff, but the problem is you don't know what to do with their answer. What does that mean to you? It doesn't, how do you weigh that? Like if I'm going to be like, okay, I'd like to be King David as opposed to, Obadiah. Well, how do you know which one fits your role? So here's what I'd say is get real with your questioning. And again, go back to your list. You're not just asking miscellaneous questions. You want to come up with good questions that reveal whether somebody possesses those skills, knowledge, and personality traits. So let me give you a couple practical tips for that too. Um, One of those is, look, ask people to demonstrate the skills that you want. Like you don't want to just say, "Hey, are you really good with ProPresenter?" Because they'll go, "Yeah, I'm pretty awesome." No, instead you want to have them sit down in some format, or especially if they've gotten to the point where they're in a personal interview, have them sit there and do something with ProPresenter. Maybe even give them a bunch of pieces and parts of a morning service or something like that, or a ministry event, and have them quickly assemble it and show you how it works when it's played out. Like there is no substitute for demonstrating skills. Years ago there. This may seem a silly example, but there was a famous jazz pianist who's called Thelonious Monk. Maybe some of you know that name. But some interviewer was talking to him all about jazz, and he said, "Look, he finally got frustrated. He said, this is ridiculous. Asking me to talk about jazz is like having somebody dance about architecture. Like you can't communicate these things in meaningful ways, but if it's a skill, you can demonstrate it." Now, when I say get real about other things, well, again, I don't want to ask people their opinions. I don't really care about people's philosophies. And this may sound pretty snotty, but I don't care about your opinion or your beliefs or your philosophies. I care about your behavior. And your behavior is going to show me if that matters, because you might have those opinions, and if it doesn't come out in your behavior, it's of no use to me. And if you have the wrong opinions, but somehow you have the right behavior, which is rare, I can make that work. And so I would encourage you to use what I call tell me about a time questions. So when you ask somebody, don't just ask them, um, are you good at getting people to like buy in and motivate volunteers? Because again, what are they going to say? Yeah, they're going to say, yeah, I'm great at that. Instead, maybe you put them in a position and say, hey, tell me about a time when somebody really didn't agree with the direction you were going, but you had to get them to give a high quality contribution anyway. Now, when you ask that question, they'll always look at you a little like they studied for a multiple choice test and you just gave them an essay. But whatever they say is meaningful, because they're going to go back in their life and they're going to talk about a real thing that happened, and you're going to be able to see them in action through that story, and that's meaningful. That gives you insight. So couple the opportunity to demonstrate Oh, and I should have mentioned, sometimes we use inbox exercises. Where like we were hiring an administrative assistant recently, and we gave her an inbox, the candidate an inbox, which had some phone messages, some calendar requests, a document to rewrite. And we gave her like half an hour to go through all of this and to like determine what's a priority. How would you handle this? What would you do with that? And then she came in and presented to our group. Now, we weren't ultimately concerned that she got the right answer about everything, but we got to see in action what she looks like and what she thinks about doing the types of things that she'd be doing on day one in the job. So demonstrate skills and tell me about a time questions. All right, that brings me to just the last couple points here. One of those is this is real simple: be picky. You got a lot riding on this. Remember, it's better even to have an open position than a bad hire. So be super picky about this. Don't settle for second best. Really decide to get what you're really wanting to get. And I would say this to you. Well, here's two practical suggestions. Number one, nobody, in my opinion, gets a free pass. Even if you're moving an internal candidate up, I run them through interviews. It's a great way to calibrate things, to set specifics, and to know that you considered this internal candidate with just as much diligence and across the same variables as you'd consider an external candidate. If you're an internal candidate or you're sort of the heir apparent to something, to me that's a free pass to the final interview or a free pass to the in-person experience. But I'm still going to ask you to demonstrate this and talk about it and everything else. And the second practical suggestion I'd give you about being picky is I used to always have staff people balk when I asked them to be judgmental about this, or they'd make excuses for somebody's performance in the interview and things like that. And look, the interview is as good as it gets. If somebody doesn't look good in the interview, they're not going to look better in practice. And I just always had to remind people, especially in ministry, that when we make judgments about this, we're being picky, but we're not judging them on the quality of them as a person or their value to God or anything like that. We're simply judging their fit for this very particular spot that we have in our mission. And so we can afford to be super judgmental about that. They can be wonderful people, but they don't fit this. All right, and the last suggestion on my list today is to say, look, um, during the search, remember that you're going to, especially if you're picky, you want to make you want to remember that the hiring experience says a lot more about you than them. Simply put, you're going to say no to a lot more people than you say yes to. And I am shocked, and maybe you've been through this on the candidate side at some point. I am shocked at how miserable potential employees are at communicating. It is very common that you just get ghosted at the end of a search process. It's not at all unusual that candidates find out that the role has been filled because they see an announcement somewhere that it's been filled. They were never told that they were no longer part of the search. And I just want to encourage you to pay attention to these things because ministry world is a lot smaller than it might seem. And you're marketing yourself, you're demonstrating your culture and commitments all through this search. And you have the opportunity to do that to far more people in the way that you say no or manage the search than to those you say yes. So here's a couple practical thoughts on that as well. Make a real point to over communicate about process and points of contact. Like every time you interact, tell them, hey, this is when you'll hear from us next. Or frequently you need to say, hey, we're headed into a busy season, so you're not going to hear anything for a couple of weeks, but don't panic. We're still on track. You'll hear from us after that. Now, of course, keep your promises, but over communicate about process and be very personal or at least individual about it. Speak to them in ways that indicate that you remember them. It's not just a mass email to candidates or that you're specifically communicating with them because I can't tell you how much in the long run it's benefited me over the years that in the profession or in professional gatherings or conferences, I met people that were unsuccessful in my searches. People I said no to. Let me put a fine point on it. People I'd rejected previously, and there was no greater compliment or affirmation than when they wanted to introduce other people to me or they wanted to come to dinner with us and things like that. Because I knew that in spite of that being an unsuccessful search, we'd exhibited all the qualities that we wanted to exhibit. We were still the people we were proud of because of how we handled them throughout. All right. Threw a ton at you there. Really, a lot of different things, a lot of practical suggestions. I hope some of those are really helpful, but even more, I hope they sort of sparked some thoughts on your part, that you might ask some good questions or provide some good info to other people on the engagement here.
Andrew, gold, gold, gold. I mean, I'm over here taking notes. I'm sharing it in the chat. It's fun because some of the things you've shared, you've actually told me over a cup of coffee. And so I know this is real and I can give too many experiences there. I'll give one quick thing. If you've got questions, put them in the chat. I see a couple coming in here. We'll get to you in just a second.